Thank you guys all for coming to the seminar. This first one we've done in what?
A few months, I guess.
It's been a while. Since Philadelphia. It had to be April or something. So yeah, we're happy to be back. Happy that you guys all chose to spend your weekend with us. We understand if you have to leave. It's been dark for hours, so it's probably midnight by now. If your question was not answered here, it's Austin's fault, and you can send a personal written complaint to Austin's actual home. His address is... you can ask us the question on our Facebook group. Just search Barbell Medicine on Facebook, or our forum. You go to our website, there's a forum tab. We're pretty active on both those things. Otherwise, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, our first question. When people lose body weight quickly, does that affect the appetite-satiety relationship more slowly compared to when you lose weight at a slower rate, more sustained? I feel like this question is worded weirdly.
Yeah, I think you probably figure what they're getting at. Basically, differences between losing weight really quickly versus slower or more sustainably.
With respect to?
Outcomes.
Yeah, the appetite, yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily say that losing weight more slowly is more sustainable as far as like a long-term rate, like rate of recidivism or weight regain. It doesn't seem to be the case, especially if we rely on data from weight loss medications. And as far as I know, with the investigation into how people rate their appetite and their satiety, it doesn't seem to be a marked difference when people lose weight relatively quickly. The biggest factor here has to do with how they lost the weight. So with weight loss medications, for example, people report being very satiated, low appetite, but if people are on very restrictive, very low energy density diets, they do tend to be quite hungry on average, but that is not restricted to just short-term periods. If they did that for a longer period of time, that they still report that same finding. So I think that's how I would answer this question.
Yeah, the short answer that I would give is I would not have any concerns about somebody losing weight more quickly after dietary interventions if that is feasible for them, and I would certainly not deliberately slow somebody's weight loss down with the thinking that that is going to make it more sustainable or easier for them to keep it off. I would prefer, if it is possible for them, to get it off quickly in a way that they feel like they can, sustain the strategies themselves. Then I have no concerns over it coming off faster. But as you said, basically I think of it less in terms of the rate of weight loss being the thing that predicts that outcome, and more so like, did this diet require you to diet at RPE 10 all the time? Was it the hardest thing in the world to just get through a day without, thinking about food nonstop and having to actively, consciously resist it all around you? Yeah, that's not gonna work very well or last very long, right? Regardless of how quickly or slowly the weight comes off. So the speed of weight change is not the variable that I'm concerned about compared with basically how difficult or not the day-to-day work is. And then if even just basic interventions result in really high effort and difficult to sustain strategies, that's one of those situations where the remarkable effect of these medications can just effectively turn all of that off, make the thoughts about food and cravings of food and all of that stuff just vanishes. That's been my experience with my patients so far.
It's interesting though, this is a pretty sustained, I don't want to call it like a old wives' tale or like urban legend, right? But people will say, no, if you lose it slower, it's more sustainable or whatever. And I think there's probably something to that insofar as if you're markedly changing your behaviors and your skill set with respect to food purchasing, food preparation, battling with different social sort of things that are going to come up, like a party or wedding, night out, something like that. That may take a significant amount of time to put all those pieces together, and so it takes a longer period of time for that person to lose weight, right? But they're armed with this skill set that you probably can't develop overnight.
Yeah. So more of a reverse causation sort of thing.
Yeah, something like that. So because people do report that quite often. And the only thing I'll say in addition to this is that in untrained individuals, when we look at muscle mass loss with rate of weight loss, it doesn't seem to be that much different if people lose weight quickly or slowly, especially if they're not bedbound or something like that. But for highly trained individuals, when they lose weight very, very quickly, they do tend to lose a significant amount more of lean body mass. And I will make the caveat, this is not from water cuts as far as those have been studied, because water technically is part of the lean body mass component, but when you look at things that don't have to do with manipulating water intake, you tend to see that. So from somebody who's a well-trained individual, if they're I don't want to lose any muscle mass, I'd probably do it more slowly. But yeah, I think we've sufficiently answered this question.
Hold on a second.
All right, question number 2. Dr. Baraki, how important is the triglycerides level on the lipid panel? All right,
Yeah.
so what is a triglyceride?
It is a chemical molecule that has a couple fatty acids attached. So it has 3 fatty acids and a little backbone. That's technically why it's triglyceride on there. And it's something that we do measure on the standard blood cholesterol panel. I did not put a ton of emphasis on it because it is typically not the first and the most important thing that I'll look at unless the levels are absolutely sky high. And by that, I mean like greater than 500 or so will immediately get my attention. A typical normal cutoff on most labs is around 150, and that's in milligrams per deciliter units on our tests. I really like if I have patients whose levels are less than 100. That is typically, indicative of good things happening. In the 100 to 150 range, I don't really sweat it too much. And then as it gets higher and higher, that typically is something that we see in situations where patients have more insulin resistance. That's that spectrum, the end stage of which is diabetes. And so see that commonly. And then in situations where there's a lot of alcohol use can be another situation where those can get high. But if those levels, if I look at a lipid panel and those levels are over 500, it's like, okay, that's my primary focus right now in the short term because I want to get those under control because it can cause certain complications. If it's more in that intermediate range, then it's not necessarily my immediate focus. So for you guys, I had a chat with one of our attendees about their basic blood lipid panel. The first thing I look at in general, if that's not the most compelling finding, is going to be to take the total cholesterol number, subtract the HDL cholesterol number. That gives you something called non-HDL cholesterol. And that's a good enough estimate of all the potential particles that we want to reduce to get down in order to reduce people's heart disease risk. So total minus HDL, sometimes that's provided on the panel. Sometimes you can just do the math yourself, basic subtraction. And for people who are who don't have a history of heart disease issues, when that number is less than about 130 milligrams per deciliter or so, I feel okay about where they're at. The higher it is from there, the more I'd like to get it down. And then for people who have heart disease history, who've had a heart attack before or something like that, that number I'm trying to get down as low as possible. And in general, with most situations, even when triglycerides are elevated, I'm still using non-triglyceride specific treatments and medications to get that down. So addressing the insulin resistance piece, addressing alcohol to the extent I can, weight loss can all help with these things. And then still, if I need to use medications, I'm still using the same ones I would in other situations like statins and ezetimibe and things like that. There are some specific medicines that are used to lower triglycerides, but the evidence for those is not nearly as good as the other ones. So I'm almost never singularly focused on the triglycerides and more so on the other stuff, unless the triglycerides are completely through the roof, like over 500, over 1,000 for sure.
Yep.
I think the highest I've seen was like 4,500 or so, which is pretty insane. So yeah, that's the short story on those.
This may surprise you, but I have nothing to add.
Okay, very good.
Regarding back pain being so prevalent globally, I'm wondering if it is attributable to just a lack of activity, overuse due to lifestyle or occupation, general lack of musculature and supporting background activity, or how do you guys think about it? And is this something we can help people with in terms of prevention or reducing the incidence of in the population or just those around us? That's a long question.
Yeah.
There's a lot of commas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like 21 Savage is a lot of
And
commas.
I think this question helps us hammer home a few important points from the pain discussion, because the way this question is framed seems to continue to look for a singular explanation for back pain, right? And hopefully if there's anything you took away, it's that it's real complicated. It's very multifactorial. It's every individual person's experience of back pain is going to be related to a whole bunch of different variables that are unique to them, their situation, their culture, their surroundings, their occupation, their et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I do not typically attribute back pain, incidence, prevalence, disability, things like that, to things like just a lack of activity or overuse or lack of musculature or any of those things. Rather, talking to the person, learning about their experience, assessing all of those different biological, psychosocial variables that we talked about, figuring out, is this person somebody who needs more immediate change in what I'm doing for them because they have some real badness going on, like they need surgery, they have cancer in their spine, they have an infection in their spine, obviously very, 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 very rare situations in broadly speaking. Or is this one of those that does not require one of those immediate, urgent kind of referrals for those kind of things, and we have all these other strategies that we can work on to manage it? The other piece of this question relates to prevention, and prevention of low back pain is an area of a ton of research and unfortunately really little promising results. From the 2018 Lancet series on low back pain, they have a specific article on prevention of low back pain, a section of it dedicated to that, where they review evidence on things. For example, like, does wearing belts reduce the incidence of prevent back pain? No. Shoe inserts, do those prevent low back pain?
Nope.
No, et cetera, et cetera. The things that they found that had some evidence, although it's not incredibly high quality evidence, nor is it incredibly massive effect sizes, was education and exercise, which sounds like a cliche coming from us when we talk about this topic, but those were the only things that they identified that had even some evidence for the prevention, quote unquote, or reducing the risk of people developing back pain. And so, I'm not going to be, I'm not super hopeful that we are going to find ways to prevent the incidence of back pain, because I think that when I say incidence, I mean people experiencing new onset acute back pain. I think that's just part of the human condition, like getting a cold. I think it's going to happen. I think more so when it happens, how we manage it in that situation, the messages that people get from their clinicians, healthcare professionals, from society, what should I do in a situation where I am experiencing back pain? I think that's where we have more of an opportunity to kind of move the needle as far as how disabling is this, how long does this last, how long does this impact people, and how likely are they to get better, return back to life, work, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of the messages that you guys heard in the lecture today revolved more around that. How do we talk about this? How do we communicate it around it? What should the recommendations be for people who are experiencing it? Rather than, if you move this one particular way, you won't get back pain. Or if you use this belt, or if you do this particular magic exercise, or if you do bird dogs, or whatever the case is, you won't experience back pain, because that ain't it. It's not gonna work that way, so.
I could imagine some sort of like very well-funded, public education campaign where it's like, exercise your back. And it's not that the exercise itself is necessarily going to reduce the incidence or whatever, but you could pair a bunch of education and verbiage and phrasing with it to sort of give people like a Reader's Digest version of your pain lecture. And that might move the needle as far as like the disability associated and sort of attitude surrounding like having low back pain. That's, I think, like the most promising area.
Australia is doing better at that.
Yeah.
Sort of the research side and translating that into clinical recommendations and things like that.
Yeah.
For the clinicians in the audience, there was something that was just published in September of 2022 called the Low Back Pain Clinical Care Standard, and that came out from Australia, and it is a fantastic document. I was recently on a podcast interview regarding low back pain for primary care doctors, and I referenced the hell out of this document. Would recommend anybody who sees patients, deals with patients, or even coaches. The way the document is written is not super fancy advanced clinical language, but September 22 low back pain clinical care standard from Australia is top-notch stuff. Would recommend.
We'll link it in the description.
There you go.
Australians are on top of it. Are you aware of their slip, slop, slap campaign?
We both learned about that in medical school.
That's right. All right. Oh boy. What would you say are the criticisms or weaknesses of barbell medicine from outsiders? Thank you, whoever asked this question. Do you want to start?
I selected this for you.
Oh, hey, thanks. I appreciate you. Well, I think outside of like any sort of personal differences, if people are like, I don't like Jordan, or if on the rare occasion somebody doesn't like Austin, outside, save for that, because that's going to be a thing. I think the biggest criticism would be that they just disagree with our interpretation of the evidence, and to which we would say, well, great, where's the opposing evidence and how do you interpret that? And then usually that argument just kind of falls flat. Or there's just different belief systems in general, and we can't agree that the sky is blue, and so it's really difficult to actually have a discussion on the evidence. So that'd be like one area that we'd be criticized on. I think also we could be criticized for maybe a lack of diversity amongst our coaching cadre and like who are members of barbell medicine. But as far as like other actual criticisms of our material and what we put out, I mean, in addition to us having extensive training and fund of knowledge within the topics that we talk about, particularly in a confident manner, we also have a lot of experience here, so people can't be like, you guys don't even lift, and we're like, can't really get us there. Yeah, it's
Lift
like,
a little bit.
Yeah, and they're like, but you're not even aware of the science. We're like, kind of did that too. So yeah, I think mostly it would just be like a personal either disagreement or some sort of like diversity kind of thing. I think those would be, or maybe that it'd be something minute, like for example, like we're not putting out enough information on a particular topic that somebody else wants to know about, and that's fair too. But there's just not that many of us. So, what do you think the criticisms would be?
I think you kind of got at one that I was thinking first. And so a lot of times when there are significant disagreements, or we get questioned a lot, how do I change this person's mind on something? And that can be problematic when the interaction between these two people, when the two people involved in the discussion or the disagreement or whatever the case is, do not share the same epistemology. And epistemology is like a shared method of how can we come to a conclusion on this, ways of knowing things. Mm-hmm. And so there are people who basically, if you try to cite scientific evidence on something, they say, no, that's trash.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if we cannot have a shared basis of how we may even come to an understanding on something, they're not going to agree with us. We're probably not going to agree with them. I heard an interview recently between two folks separate from Barbell medicine or anything else like that on a nutrition related topic. And one person was trying to cite some of the prospective cohort nutritional, research on things. And the other guy's like, no, all nutrition science is trash. And so it's like, okay, that is not going to ever come to a productive conclusion because they are talking past one another. There's no shared understanding of like, how can we come closer to the truth on this, or how can we become less wrong? So if you're not operating on the same level on that front, then you're never going to disagree. So I think that to the extent that people, as you said, might disagree with our interpretation of the evidence or something like that, it is probably going to come a fair amount of the time from people who say, I just don't trust the evidence, or that evidence is trash, or I don't use that to come to my conclusions. I trust my observational experience, and I don't care what the research says because I don't trust it, or whatever the case is. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm good. I think probably one of the original criticisms we got, particularly when we left Starting Strength, was that we were just trying to overcomplicate things, making everything very, very nuanced and complicated. But I think if you take things away from this seminar, while there's a lot to know for like the fund of knowledge standpoint, what you actually end up doing in practice, whether it be in a medical clinic or in your gym or whatever, it really just kind of opens you up, saying there are a lot of different options, a lot of different roads that all lead to Rome. You can pick many different exercises. You can pick many different rep schemes. There are many different dietary patterns that fit with the health promoting dietary pattern, rather than just the one way. And so, yes, it's less restrictive and less simple in that way because you have multiple choices to make, but it's also kind of easier, in my opinion, to do because
you catch more people.
And there are many different things to do.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anything else you think on this? I mean, probably. Somebody in the comments, they're going to let us know. Oh, no.
Here's why you guys suck.
Here's why you guys suck. Yeah. In higher socioeconomic populations, we tend to see more alternative therapies being sought out and prescribed, along with unsupported narratives to justify these treatments from influential figures of authority. How would you reframe these narratives and guide this patient? Yeah, I wonder who wrote this. He's like, what are you looking at me for? Oh, man. Oh, man. It's tough. I don't know that reframing the narrative is probably where I would start. I'd kind of probably start this with what do you understand about what you think you're treating? Like, what is your understanding of this medical process, this disease process, or this condition that you're treating, and what do you understand about the effect of this medicine? Just trying to see where their knowledge base is at, fund of knowledge is at, and then kind of go from there rather than doctor-splaining. This is actually not based in evidence, et cetera. But rather, if I can see where they're coming from, see what their belief system is and their current sort of knowledge, I can it's not interjecting as much as it is guiding them from that closer to what we think the truth is now based on current evidence. Doesn't mean at the time they're going to fully reject, like, yeah, I don't need this particular treatment or this particular test or whatever, but we might come to a more shared understanding of their treatment goals, our goals for them, and how we're trying to achieve that. Because ultimately, we want the patient to be on the optimal health trajectory, also be satisfied with their care, but also maintain our ethical standard, to do no harm. So how would you approach this?
I mean, complementary alternative medicine, the world is really big, really complex. It rakes in, I don't have figures on it, but lots and lots and lots of money is spent on those sorts of therapies.
Yep.
And many of them are not particularly effective. But when you talk to people who utilize these things, oftentimes you hear things like, it works for me, or it worked for me. And we talked about this a little bit on our most recent podcast, where there was some research on various supplements as it related to like blood cholesterol lowering, and we saw with each one, there was people took placebo, and there were some who got worse, some who got better, and everything in between. And every supplement, some who got worse, some who got better, and everything in between, just like the placebo. And so I said, I can see how somebody might take one of these things, and if they were the person who their numbers look better, they could be like, see, it worked for me, I'm sticking with it. And that's a pretty tough thing to convince somebody otherwise on, right? So this gets back to this whole idea that I feel like I've been talking about everywhere I go recently, about changing people's minds on things, and how difficult that can be to do in these kind of conversations. But if somebody's coming to me and wanting to pursue some form of this treatment, my first thing is probably getting a sense of their background history of how they got to this conclusion and how they got to me.
Yep.
Because a fair amount of the time they've had some interaction, some experience with the healthcare system that may have let them down in some way, and that led them to go in a different direction. And trying to figure out how that happened, because they may be coming in still skeptical of what I'm going to recommend because of my position here. So trying to get a sense of where they're coming from and why they think what they think is the first step. And at least trying to get them to engage with the things that are most likely to actually help them, even if I'm not able to fully dissuade them from the thing that they're pursuing. So you'll hear this a lot from, sometimes you'll hear interviews of like cancer doctors who are like, what if your patient thinks that they should take this supplement for their cancer? And it's like, well, if they're willing to engage in the cancer treatment that I'm recommending, and I don't have any reason to believe that this supplement that they're taking is screwing with, interfering with, or making what I'm doing worse, then that may not be a battle that's always worth fighting with the individual. So kind of a case-by-case situation, as most of these things are. But I think getting to know the person, where they're coming from, why they think what they think, and seeing, can I at least get you to engage in things that I'm very confident are going to help you? And then leaving it to a secondary thing of steering them away from other stuff, particularly if it's like a cash pay situation and they're going to pay for it themselves, which is typically the case, as insurance don't tend to cover things that don't work. Then I can only put so much energy into like trying to tell somebody, don't do this thing for yourself, even if I may not be the person to prescribe it or recommend it for you.
Yeah, if it's harmful, I'd be more actively trying to get them to stop doing the thing. If it's less harmful, but more of like a cost physically, then I'm like, that's
on you.
That's on you. Yeah. And then the other thing is, a lot of this is like the locus of control, right? So if you have this condition that's been either dismissed or otherwise what you feel like is undertreated, poorly managed throughout the medical system, your medical experience so far, and then you get to a physician who's willing to prescribe you something or take it seriously or whatever, you feel like, no, I'm in control. Finally got what I'm looking for, even if the supplement or the treatment is not evidence-based, mostly placebo at that point, but they feel like I'm doing this, I'm in control. And so on the one hand, I love that you're in control, you just got that self-efficacy. I just wish that whatever you're leveraging there has has no harm or potential risk. So yeah, if you had somebody that was already prescribed on a bunch of stuff that you otherwise wouldn't do because it's not evidence-based and they got transferred to you, how would you?
Would I like aggressively discontinue it? Not immediately. I might whittle away at it over time.
Yeah. if there was a significant risk?
Well, yeah, we're going to have that conversation pretty quick.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
All right. Just testing you.
Yeah.
All right. Question number 6. What can we do as rehab professionals to help reduce unnecessary imaging for patients with pain? If you just take this question as it's written, it's like, I don't know that that's necessarily your role in the healthcare system as far as like ordering imaging or demanding imaging, and if that's what you're doing, I don't necessarily know that that's the root cause of this unnecessary imaging.
Yeah.
Rather,
but they can help.
Certainly, certainly. So I think this is maybe I don't want to say top down and just view the medical system in this hierarchical system, but like it starts a lot with physicians ordering unnecessary imaging because they're not aware of clinical practice guidelines, and they're just doing stuff to appease the patient rather than having tough conversations with them about what their pain means, what their likely trajectory is, referring them appropriately. But then sure, at the level of the rehab professional, if the rehab professional is like, you got a strained quadratus lumborum, that's what's causing your low back, your QL, or your tensor fascia lata is weak, or your glutes aren't firing, or something else like that. Leading people to these like singular point causes of their pain experience can, again, further lead them down this road of like, I need to get an MRI or a CT or an X-ray of this to visualize where is the problem, where is the pain generator. And it's like, I don't know why we're using that language, because that doesn't really not only is inaccurate as far as what's going on, but also potentially harmful in getting people to instill this narrative within themselves.
I think that one of the things that might lead patients to pursue these kind of things is if they are getting conflicting messaging.
Sure.
Because a lot of people, as we discussed, might view an MRI as like, put it on this pedestal of this is the answer donut. This is the truth machine. This is gonna resolve all this human crap from all these different people telling me different things. No, that's gonna get resolved if I get this MRI, and it's gonna show me exactly what's wrong with me, right? And so there are a couple things. I mean, there are places where you can go direct to a physical therapist without referral through a primary care person. So there, the PT might be the first person to come across the patient, and there they have a very significant role as the person who's receiving the patient for the first time in guiding what direction they're gonna go, and being as aware as they can be of all this stuff that we're talking about, being aware of, hey, maybe that clinical care standard document that I just talked about, knowing all that stuff frontward, backward, upside down would be really good as it impacts your communication with the patient. And then even if you're not the first person to see the patient, even if you're receiving the patient by way of a physician or something like that, the more clear and consistent the messaging is across the entire healthcare system, the better. That's a good thing. If they're getting clear and consistent messaging that they don't need this imaging necessarily, that the prognosis is good, that here's what the recommendations are, et cetera, then that will tend to boost confidence and trust in the recommendations, right? But the more conflicting information, they're like, one doctor told me it was this, the other told me it was this, the physical therapist told me it was this, of course they're gonna want that. That's a completely rational desire to have if you're getting all sorts of conflicting information from all over the place. So as healthcare professionals, if you're receiving the patient first, everything we talked about this morning applies. All the guidelines in these documents apply. If you're receiving the patient second via somebody else through referral, being consistent with the messaging is helpful. And then outside of your professional role, just being, as a member of society, helping us message about this stuff accurately, because you're gonna have friends, you're gonna have family, you're gonna have training partners, people in the gym who wanna run stuff by you. Conveying these positive, kind of optimistic messages about things is a much more helpful way than focusing excessively on diagnosis. So shifting the emphasis away from a tissue structure specific diagnosis from imaging and more towards prognosis is really what we tend to do. Prognosis more than diagnosis, particularly when the diagnosis does not matter that much insofar as it guides you to do something different, right?
Yeah. We really just need a public health campaign.
Yes.
That's what you're saying. Okay, next question. Do the addictive properties of energy-dense, hyperpalatable foods affect appetite and satiety imbalance? Does addiction to these types of foods play a role in overall increase in adiposity in the population? So I'll answer the second question first. In a subset of individuals with excess adiposity or individuals with obesity, yes, there are addictive behaviors engaged that are part and parcel with their food-related behaviors, whether that's food seeking and the type of foods that they buy, and some of them certainly are hyper-palatable, ultra-processed, energy-dense foods. Food addiction is a small subset of obesity in general, and the contribution of food addiction or particular addiction to specific types of either macronutrients, whether it's carbohydrates, fat, or the blend between, or particular foods is a current area of research that is pretty controversial. I will link in the description below on this video and then tell you, the audience, that there is a great, it's called Great Debates in Nutrition in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition on food addiction and like whether it's a thing or not, and then how to think about this. And so the distillation from that, and as far as I interpret it, is that if food addiction might be a thing, although regulated through different pathways than other addictions, and it is a small subset of individuals with obesity in general. And I don't think that I would strictly limit that to energy-dense, hyperpalatable, ultra-processed foods, because there are other foods that people are addicted to that don't necessarily qualify for that in that small subset. So yes, for a certain small group, I would, yes, agree with that. But I don't think that energy-dense, hyper-palatable, ultra-processed foods are addicting broadly across the population. Rather, I think that they are not satiating. They don't instill this feeling of fullness. They're easily available, and that they're everywhere, and that they're very, very cheap. And so because they have basically flooded the food environment, we cannot escape them. And until they're either less prevalent in our food environment or giving people much more healthy options for them to choose in our food environment, we won't be able to really do anything about this obesity epidemic. I mean, we've been saying this every
seminar and podcast and Q&A.
If you don't change the food environment for everybody, like, we are not going to fix this problem. And so, I mean, I don't know what's being done on the food environment level. There's been sugar taxes, there's been soda taxes, and some evidence of efficacy for both of those things. But like, the food environment must change, otherwise.
If you don't change the food environment, our only hope to put a substantial dent in the problem is with these highly potent medication treatments that we have available.
Yep.
Unfortunately, a substantial portion of the population collectively is opposed to both of those things.
Yes.
They want neither food environment changes, because that involves big government and things like that, nor do they want medications, because that's a crutch and you should just try harder because it's a, puritanical society.
You got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
There you go.
And then just slog through it. Because
So
I walked up.
Good luck to everybody out there.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah, good luck. Very optimistic message here at the Barbell Medicine Seminar. Really want to leave you guys on a high note. All right. Next question. Quality evidence behind the biohacking genre of content gaining popularity, like a coffee enema. I'm big on that.
I suppose that might qualify.
That's right. Example: 30 minutes of sunlight in the morning, particularly sunning your yoni. Are you into that? I had to look up how to spell yoni. How do you think you spell yoni?
I don't know what that is.
Okay, it's your your urogenital triangle. If you're trying to sun that,
Oh, okay.
that's your yoni. How do you think you spell yoni?
Y-A-N-I? I don't
It's
know.
Y-O-N-I. Obviously, you're an amateur. Yeah. 30 minutes of sunlight in the morning, supplementing with electrolytes, hot and cold exposure for HGH, for human growth hormone, red light therapy, blue light glasses, nasal breathing, and mouth taping. Well,
They went in on the examples here.
that's a lot of examples. And I think, for the evidence on each of those things, it would just be a very, very long answer. As far as why do people believe in these things, some of them have been promulgated by very, very influential individuals based on either their own personal experience, like, oh, I did this, felt this, try it for yourself. That's the evidence, this anecdotal evidence. Some of these things have maybe a mechanistic plausibility in that there's a biological mechanism that seems like it might be beneficial to health, performance, or both, longevity in some cases, but has not been replicated in large human data sets, which is why we don't necessarily recommend this stuff. Look, if I could tell you that sunning your nether regions every morning was going to add years to your life or life to your years, I would be up here. We would have a whole section on how to appropriately sun your urogenital triangle.
We would give everybody a break in midday to
That's
go
what
get
we would
maximal
do.
sun
We would
exposure.
do it together, yeah, privately, okay? Same thing, look, if there was a performance benefit to be had by supplementing with electrolytes before, during, or after a workout,
we would do it.
We would do it. Look, we choke down creatine on a regular basis, and the benefit for that is like
a dry scoop.
100, yeah, straight to the dome. The issue is that if there's not any sort of clinically relevant signal, meaning that data in humans that actually changes an outcome we care about, it is very difficult to feel confident in recommending these things. And although we do not have the following of a Joe Rogan, a Rhonda Patrick, Huberman, etc.
There were some names in this question originally that I took out, but there you go.
Okay, put them back in. Although our following is not that big, we do feel like ethically charged to be responsible with our recommendations. And so until there are quality data sets suggesting a benefit, we just can't recommend them. The only thing I'll say on here is with the mouth taping, for example, they do that in some individuals with obstructive sleep apnea who are having difficulties using like a nasal pillow device, and that seems to be a benefit. Had a sleep doctor slide into my DMs and show me some evidence on that. And so in that case, that seems fine. But if you're just doing mouth taping without like the CPAP, it feels like, can you imagine going to bed, like you say to Lorraine, night babe, and you just, and she goes to ask you, hey Austin, when's our dinner reservation for tomorrow? You go, mm-mm. Like, I just don't think that's gonna work. Yeah, last thing I'll say on this particular question with respect to human growth hormone, like this is actually an extensively studied hormone as far as how it seems to affect not only health and performance, and it doesn't seem like any fluctuation or like optimization of your HGH as an adult seems to matter. If it drops below a normal level, general badness, but any super physiological doses of HGH do not do anything except for general badness. Make your jaw grow, make your internal organs grow, but you don't get stronger, you don't gain more lean body mass, you don't get leaner, you don't recover from injury faster, you don't get an adamantium skeleton. All you get is a big jaw and a big gut and a lot of money missing from your wallet. So any sort of technique to optimize HGH, raise HGH, take HGH is a money grab. And some people are going to be reading this like, well, I heard that HGH was great. Like, from who? And what are their ties to the industry? Just saying, follow the evidence.
Yeah, this whole genre of content really irritates me. I think that people in general these days are just like addicted to more information about anything, and the more they're just regurgitating, this latest thing from this abstract in this rat study or something like that, and here's why you should do this thing, just adding more and more and more to the list of things that people need to do every day to achieve perfect health. And then if I look and I take the population who is swallowing that content, and I look at the article that we have on our website titled like, where should my priorities be for health? There are like 7 priorities for health on that topic. And I take that population and I see what proportion of people in this population are meeting all of these top priorities that I would suggest for people's health, to include meeting or exceeding the physical activity guidelines, having adequate high quality sleep, eating the dietary pattern that we're talking about with respect to, fiber consumption, fruit and vegetable consumption, saturated fat content, adequate protein, things like that, et cetera, among the other things on that list. The likelihood that the people who are listening to that and trying to stack more and more and more optimization things into their daily routine are meeting all of the things on that list, exceptionally slim. And so we have evidence for so much more effective, big time impacts on health outcomes from these very basic things, but basic things are not super exciting and fun. And so, nerding out on this stuff that they come out with every week can be addictive in itself, I suppose, for some of these folks. And I'm not really a fan, particularly when the evidence for it in humans is not good. So I am happy to ignore those folks, and I recommend you do too.
Nice. Yeah, just care less. I got it. Okay. All right. Next question. How do you view the effectiveness of telehealth? And I would like to make an addendum to this question.
Okay.
Just remote sort of health coaching.
Remote things.
Remote things.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you view remote things? All right, so Austin, you've been doing this for a minute. How do you view the effectiveness?
Yeah, I do telemedicine. I've done it since 2017. Have a patient panel, do primary care for them, and do other kind of remote health consults. And as far as how I view the effectiveness, I view it as quite effective. I think that a large proportion of basic primary care does not require a hands-on physical examination. Mm-hmm. The overwhelming majority of it does not require a hands-on physical examination. Some situations that may, or people think may require a hands-on physical examination might involve, hey, like this patient has a musculoskeletal pain complaint. We do musculoskeletal pain consults and rehab all the time without hands-on physical examinations of people. It's not to say that no case requires it, but it is not a universal that all patients with that situation need a physical examination by somebody in person. So I feel, I've been doing it again since 2017, and the number of situations where I've had to refer somebody, you need to go see somebody in person for this to get examined, I can barely think of a case. Yeah. A huge proportion of the primary care that I've been able to do has been effective from a remote standpoint, and has improved, the frequency that I'm able to interact with people compared to in-person appointments where it might be, okay, the soonest follow-up I can give you is 4 months away or something like that. But I'm wanting to monitor and adjust your blood pressure medicines. With this, I'm able to ping people back and forth, and I can tweak their meds once a week. Yep. Or diabetes medicines or something like that, and I can get things adjusted to the level I want and get control of things much faster and things like that. So I've had a quite positive experience with telemedicine, telehealth, yep, sorts of things.
I am aware of the evidence on telehealth in primary care, and particularly patient satisfaction scores. So patient satisfaction scores are very high with telemedicine. They don't have to go in a doctor's office. They don't have to wait. They see their doctor right away. Very convenient to them, and so they rate their satisfaction very, very high, which is interesting because other times where you measure patient satisfaction scores within the clinic that actually negatively correlates to outcomes. Like the more satisfied the patient is, the worse they end up doing. And some of that thought is because the doctors will order unnecessary tests or treatments or whatever that ultimately harms the patient, and they end up doing worse. So this is kind of a nice pushback against that. With respect to like remote coaching or remote stuff. Tomorrow will actually be the 10-year anniversary of filing for the Barbell Medicine business license. So we've been doing this for 10 years, which is pretty, well, I didn't think we'd make it this far, so it's pretty cool. But it has been a really interesting like growth trajectory from when we first started and just coaching people compared to like when I was coaching folks in the gym. And I think actually the outcomes, if you're measuring like people who are able to sustain weight loss, people who've gotten stronger or maintain their physical activity participation, you're still getting that same self-selected population, right, of people that are like relatively motivated, ready to change. They're in that either action or even maintenance phase of the trans-theoretical model behavior change. So you're getting the same self-selected population, but I am able to communicate so much more with these people on a regular basis because I'm not just seeing them 2 hours a week, for example, at separate times. They feel like they can email me if there's a problem, and then I can communicate a lot of different information to them and give them more resources rather than them having to like remember the stuff, or me, in addition to seeing them in person, emailing them later on. So I actually think it's a little bit more effective from a coaching standpoint than what I was doing before. And some of that's definitely due to like experience and knowledge and whatnot. But man, I'd be hard pressed to go back to coaching people in person unless it was like, I got some extra time and I'd like to do it, you know. I do miss like the face-to-face interaction, but not enough to take on a full schedule of like, all right, we're gonna train from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., you know, every single day. So cool. I'm pumped we made it 10 years too. Are you surprised?
No.
Man, look at this. Look at that. I'm a hype man. When I met Baraki, that was 2012 was my like orientation.
When you were coming into med school.
Yeah, exactly. And the first thing that, you know, related to barbell medicine, he was like, I got this idea about the sarcopenia article or whatever. And I was like, I will pay you to write this article for barbell medicine rather than do anything else with it. And he's like, okay. And then he wrote it, I read it, and I go, this is genius. I must acquire this man's friendship. No. Then we got to lifting together, and then, well, it's a tale as old as time. We became great friends, and here we are. So, okay.
Last couple questions.
Are we here? All right.
Almost there.
Next question. How to take the ego out of lifting at a lower fatigue level? I'll tell you this. I don't have an easy solution to this. The problem, and I don't even view it as ego, I think it's more of like a historical perspective on your performance and how that jives with your expectations of yourself on any given day. If you've got this long, multi-year, and in my case, 10 plus year career of lifting weights, particularly at a high level, I know what I can squat for every rep range from 1 to 20, and anytime that's on the table, I'm like, well, I gotta meet or beat my previous best, and anything less than that is a failure. Same thing with bench press, deadlift, and other exercises I have all these previous exposures to. And so I don't know that ever goes away, but I think understanding the effectiveness of things that aren't at a limit effort, limit exertion, helps me pick a better weight that is just as effective, but doesn't put me over the edge as far as fatigue goes. And in fact, I think the knowledge that if I can do a higher dose of those less fatiguing things is likely to put me ahead even, that has been super useful for my training. So now I am able to select lower weights, and instead of being like, well, guess I just don't have it today, I'm like, well, this is just as effective as if I lifted 10 pounds more. It's not an all-time PR, but it's just as effective, and I feel fine about it. My training sessions now are so much less stressful to me from like a mental standpoint. I would never have like squat anxiety, bench anxiety, deadlift anxiety where I'd be worrying all day, but I would be perseverating about the number. I have to hit this today. If not, everything's off the rails. This is going poorly or whatever. And now when I go in the gym, it's a more fun experience. And I have loved training for such a long time that I look back at that period where I was like, it's gotta be heavier, it's gotta be more, I gotta progress. I'm like, that must have been a dark cloud, just very irritable, angry. How much caffeine do I need to take? How much Rick Ross do we need? How much Olympic Randall Strawson Iron Mind videos do we need to watch in the background of the garage to get hyped up for this? So yeah, I don't know that I would ever take your ego out. You just can't, right? It's just there. It's like always in the background. The point is, if you understand and agree that lifting at a relatively lighter weight, so lower intensity, greater or lower proximity to failure is just as effective as lifting a heavier weight and closer to failure, then why does it matter to you? And my whole thing, if you're not going to PR, then who cares? If a PR is on the table, take it. Yeah, send it, do the thing. But if it's not a PR, who cares? You matched an old PR? Nobody cares about that. You set a new PR at a higher rep range? No one cares about that. I'm serious, right? And to be fair, no one cares about your PRs, period. All right? And once you finally internalize that,
he took my answer away.
Once you finally internalize that, then you've reached Austin's final form. Yeah, but I think some of this is knowledge related, and then also just accepting like we're all humans and we have these desires to be better than we were before. I think that's fine. It's just going to happen over a longer period of time. That's okay.
Yeah, I think that a lot of what you described about your experience matches exactly what my experience had been along the way, so I don't necessarily need to rehash that. There are some other things that you kind of learn through experience and can help to make this process easier. I mean, I think about all of you are going to experience setbacks. All of you already have experienced some form of setback in training, and sometimes pretty major setbacks. I think about, one of my recurring issues on and off over the years has related to certain kinds of elbow tendinopathy, and so I'll get my bench up to 400, and then something will get sensitive and pissed off, and I have to back way off. Sometimes I've had to back off as light as the empty bar, and then I'll work back up, and oh, sweet, 420 went. Elbow's pissed off shortly thereafter. Have to back sometimes all the way down to the empty bar, and then work up again. Oh, sweet, 440, okay. Damn it, elbow's hurting again. Back all the way up. And so after multiple bouts of running through this kind of thing and coming back stronger than before every time, it helped me to eject this idea of like artificial time constraints that there are on training. This idea that you have to make your training progress efficiently, that you need to do it as fast as possible and anything else is wasting time.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that makes people make stupid decisions in training, among others. But that's a major driver, is this idea that if I don't add weight as quickly as possible, for example, as is commonly recommended in the beginner phase of training, then it's wasting time. No, it's not. Because you can do it as fast as possible. At some point, you're gonna have an injury, or experience pain, or need to back off, or something's gonna happen in your life and stress you out, or you're gonna miss a couple sessions, or your sleep's gonna be bad, you're gonna have no choice but to reduce the weight or something, and it's like, okay, well, if I did the math, how many sessions did I lose in this sort of thing? And then ultimately you come out ahead in the long run. This is a very, very, very long game. And so to the extent that I wasted time by having to back off 400 pounds on my bench training, as an example, and then still come back and exceed the prior level of performance. So why do I care so much about what's happening today?
Day to day, yeah.
On a particular day? Why am I putting so much emphasis on the performance today, in the gym, in my garage, at home, with nobody around? Nobody cares about this. Why do I care about this so much? Oh, I don't care about this. I'll just take what's there and it's fine. And then the more you do that, it kind of snowballs. Positive momentum of, that was a win today, instead of overshooting, failing, feeling bad afterwards, something like that, right? And that continues to snowball to where, like you were saying, now walking into a training session is easy, walking out of a training session is easy. And I'm like, oh, I can do this training program as I did for 2 years straight, basically. I did the same weekly program because I felt great all the time, and numbers would fluctuate a bit, but in general, we're trending upwards, and I had no issues. So I think it's something that you probably have to have the combination of the rational knowledge of us saying, okay, going from 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 RPE has a pretty quickly plateauing effectiveness in terms of the stimulus it gives you, while it has an exponential rise in the fatigue cost, and you will pay that cost whether you want it or whether you like it or not. So that intellectual, rational knowledge, and combine that with the experience of, okay, when I buy into this and I stay a rep or 2 or 3 or 4 away from failure, I feel better, I can do more, I burn out less, I have to deload less frequently, if ever, right? Not every 3 or 4 weeks or whatever the case is, or resets or whatever you want to call them. And in general, things go better. So
yeah,
that's been my experience.
Yeah, so I got this, now I'm on this bodybuilding tip, trying to get thick and juicy for the winter, because nobody else cares.
Okay.
I told the person who I had help me program this that my default would be to add weight all the time to try to lift as much weight as possible, because that's just who I am as a person. And he goes, and you don't want to do that? And I go, I just don't want to do the same thing that I always do, which is just end up reverting to, let's do a couple sets of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like, let's max out. And he goes, well, what about like a rep range? What if instead of, all right, we're gonna do a set of 6 at 8 or 2 reps left in reserve, what if we do a range of 6 to 10? And the only way you can add weight is if through across all the sets you hit 10, 10, 10 reps. And then next week you can add a little bit of weight.
Yeah,
go,
double progression kind of
that's
deal.
genius.
Yeah.
Let's go. Yeah, so anyway, that's how I'm like saving myself from myself. Yeah. Okay. Oh boy. Not hugely important, but seeing as one of you rates himself as above average on jokes, any snappy comebacks for a female powerlifter that occasionally receives unsolicited advice on form if she ventures into a commercial gym? Oh boy. Let me tell you this. Now that I've joined recently a new gym that is kind of a commercial gym, I see all sorts of awful things. Awful things. In fact, I was thinking about doing a tweet thread on like all the things that I've seen that I'm like, oh boy. But then I thought about being more positive, and I'm seeing a bunch of positive things.
There you go.
Yeah.
Look at that.
100%. These people are, look, they're all lifting, which is great. They're all pushing themselves. They all seem to have some sort of program because I see them like methodically like work their way around the gym. It's great. There's a good social set. It's very positive. But I will never and have never in my life gone up to somebody while they're doing their exercise or afterwards and been like, if you did this would actually be better for your technique, for your performance, or whatever. If they ask me, I may comment, but certainly not during and definitely not even after. I can see people deadlifting from across the room with full-on cat back sort of thing. Look at your face right now. And I'm like, they're probably fine. They know what they're doing.
And they probably were fine.
Yeah. As far as snappy comebacks, though, I'm just trying to think of ways to diffuse the situation. Like, I don't have a bunch of great jokes because I've never personally experienced this. No one's ever come up to me after my deadlifts and been like, if you push your knees out more, you'll actually be able to activate your adductor magnus. And so I'm more curious. Okay, so we have a lot of women here. Have you been in a commercial gym recently?
Yeah.
Put you on the spot? Do people say anything to you?
No.
No?
Never.
Okay, you're a coach, so nobody's saying anything to you.
They are.
Wait, what? In your own gym?
No.
No.
Commercial gym.
What do people say to you?
Hey, you could angle your arms more. Hey.
You could what your arms more?
Angle your arms.
Angle.
Angle. Okay. That seems oddly non-specific. Little tips.
Like mid-set this happening.
Have you ever tried like no hablo inglés?
Like the headphones.
You could do that. No hablo inglés. Yeah, try that. Or you could say, I'm deaf or something like that. You could say that. Like, I can't hear you. That'd be interesting, I guess. I'm just trying to think about like the psychology of a person going up to a complete stranger, offering them form tips, and then expecting like a thank you afterwards.
I mean, I think that I would just thanks and go on with your life is a perfectly reasonable response.
Yeah, maybe like thanks but no. Yeah, or no thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Leah, when's the last time you were in a commercial gym?
It's been a couple years.
Oh, okay. Cassie?
It's been a couple years. I mean, I've had comments in the past, but even in a commercial gym now, no one will come up and say
No one said because you're too strong.
Because you're deadlifting 170 kilos or
The
something.
other thing they'll say is like, oh, I don't do that anymore.
Right. I used to do that. They're like, oh, back when you were strong, back in the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Just really troll them aggressive.
They did that.
You sure they have a cousin that they know?
But I usually just say, oh, thank you, but I'm fine.
No. Anybody else have
I have a coach.
any of the women here? Yeah. Something egregious?
This guy came up to me and he's like, I see you benching the same weight every week. Would you like some help?
Oh. And what did you say?
I was like, no thanks.
Yeah. Again, no hablo inglés would be.
It was slightly easier this week. I had to tell him that. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
Thanks, but no.
Benching like 135 with that form. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm just thinking.
What tips are you gonna give me?
All right. So if you're watching, right. Yeah. So yeah. How strong are you? Right. It's like, oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't know. Like, so if you're watching this video, so a few thousand people will watch this. I think we're like 65,000 subs.
Okay.
Yeah, we're doing it. If you're watching this video and you happen to be a man and you considering like, should I go up to this woman and offer her form advice? The algorithm goes directly to no. Nope, never should. But what if she's about to injure herself? Nope. What if I think she could benefit from my instruction? Nope. The only time, in fact, that you should give a woman, or actually anybody else, some form advice is if they ask you. If they ask you. And if you are not qualified to give such advice, what you should say is, I don't really know. I just know it works for me. And that would be a perfectly truthful and fine answer. So yeah, just, I don't know. So if you're watching this, if you're a woman watching this and you have like really interesting, egregious stories, like send them to us. I would love to blast this stuff on social media with a funny quip to like, but I'm thinking diffusing the situation, right? It's like, 'cause you just don't want them to come up to you again. That's the whole point, right? Just like leave me alone.
What I've done, Jordan, I've actually got told that many times, believe it or not.
Wait, for them to leave you alone?
No.
Oh. I was like, get out, Sean.
Unsolicited advice.
Yeah,
People
sure.
Come up to me in a commercial gym, and the thing is, I don't look strong, so I'm totally cool with it. I don't get offended. My
Sure.
snappy comeback, which is actually, I guess, polite, is, "Oh, I'll try that next time."
Oh, sure. You
And
just,
the funniest follow-up is when I don't do what they said, and I'll do my normal form. They're like, "See,
Yeah,
Good
yeah.
job. There you go."
little confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias,
Yeah,
of
little-
course. There you go.
Yeah, in the flesh. Man, does anybody say, when's the last time you were in a commercial gym? You've been in the military gyms.
Yeah, I use military gyms all the time.
Do people say anything to you?
No,
Never.
no.
I only get comments like,
I just get eyeballed. when I'm
100%.
lifting.
Myron.
Yes.
People are like, how much weight is that? I'm like, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Or even if it's not, it's a lot. Yeah. All right.
This is the last one?
Yep. Besides barbell medicine seminars, what other continuing education would you recommend for a strength coach or any fitness/healthcare professional? What was that guy's pain seminar you went to? Was it Ben?
Ben Cormax?
Yeah.
And Greg Lehman's. Both of those guys are good for pain stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had any particular answers. I'm happy to start.
Yeah, start. Do your thing.
So there is a lot of excellent information out there. The reason I included this question, though, was because I don't want this to come across in a negative or pejorative way, but it reminds me a bit of the biohacking question in the sense that people think that more information and content is necessarily going to be better. And I think that even if you came to this seminar this weekend, I would be ecstatic if you left this seminar retaining, I don't know, 15% of what we talked about.
I was thinking 10%. Yeah.
And so I don't know that my thought is, here's more content for you. Here's more continuing education content, because there is a lot of really excellent, basic, fundamental information that would be helpful for people to absorb, retain, and redeploy with their clients and patients and things like that I would much rather you master the topics of behavior change that we used to start out the weekend with, right? Physical activity guidelines that I said that I talked about in the next lecture. All this stuff relating to obesity and how we talk about it, how we address it, how we think about it in the next lecture. The stuff relating to cardiovascular disease, blood lipids, blood pressure, metabolic health, diabetes, things like that. Getting a really good handle on the basics of what we should be doing for that. If you're a coach from the lifestyle standpoint, if you're a clinician from the clinical standpoint, if you're a layperson from the what can I do myself to improve this kind of thing, rather than I just need more content, even though the basics, the fundamental stuff that can help with this, like going and worrying about supplementing electrolytes and other ridiculous things that Huberman is recommending while you are not getting adequate sleep, while you are not meeting physical activity guidelines, while your dietary pattern leaves much to be desired, while you may be consuming a bit too much alcohol, among many, many, many other things. It's like the basics get us so far, and without mastering that as a regular person, as it related to that question, or as a coach and clinician, mastering not only this information, but how do I convey it to people, and how do I facilitate behavior change to achieve those things before I start jumping to more information, more content, more CME, CEU kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So unless you feel like I knew everything that they talked about already this weekend, I would suggest really mastering that stuff before seeking out more in other places.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, I think our reference list at the end of each section, like if you haven't read the majority of those studies or guidelines, I think that would be a great place to start. That also happens to be free, so that's kind of nice. But I think, maybe what somebody was asking with this question is like, who else should I
I get
to? And I think, and this is, look, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on our podcast later, and you're like, but we're friends, how come you left us out? So I forgot your name. I'm sorry. So this is a non-exhaustive list of people that we tend to like and we tend to share their information. So you said Greg Lehman, you said Ben Cormack.
Yep.
I like the Alinea stuff from Alan Flanagan, the Sigma Nutrition stuff, the Nadolski brothers. That's Dr. Spencer Nadolski and his brother Carl Nadolski. They have a podcast. What do they call it? The Docs Who Lift?
Yeah.
You think we should like say something about
Challenge
that?
them.
We listen and follow lots of their stuff. And again, it is interesting because we all seem to agree on very similar stuff. And you guys are like, that's just an echo chamber. And it's like, well, we all use the same epistemology to come to these kind of ideas. And it's like, well, the data says this, so here's where we're at. Therefore, we share the same beliefs. And so that's kind of nice. But a lot of these folks put out a lot of additional information in topics and fields and with other experts that are tangential to the stuff that we talked about this weekend. Yep. Any other like professionals that you really like?
I very much enjoy Knuckles and Trexler's sense of humor.
Yeah.
Even their dry humor is good, their content's good, their analysis of evidence is good. Eric Helms is a friend and does good stuff as well.
Iron Culture, those guys. Anything else?
Those are probably most of the ones that immediately come to mind.
If you go to our podcast and you scroll through like all the guests that we've had, those would be like a good resource of people that were like pretty on brand with their content. But I agree with Austin. It's like there's a lot of stuff in this seminar and a lot of continuing ed stuff we provided to you that you can continue to access on your own free will. So, anything else? Is that it? Cool.
I think we did it.
Thank you guys so much for coming out. That's a wrap on the LA seminar.